Hello, good afternoon, good to see everyone. I'm Vanessa Brittle, Director of Lifelong Learning. If you're just coming in, please be sure to get something to eat. I just need to change my screen here for a second. There. So today is November 10th, and we are so happy to have you at Living and Giving. Wendy Bloom is going to take you from here. We are recording this, and we'll have microphones for you to ask questions. I think people usually can hear me. And before we start, I cannot help myself. Please watch your Macomb at Home next week, same time. Adam Nimoy, yes, Leonard Nimoy's son will be here at 12:30, 1 o'clock program. He should be very interesting. He wrote a book, The Most Human. If you watch Star Trek, it's a quote from there. We'll explain that next week. And there'll be books here to buy. So without any further ado, Wendy, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Living and Giving program. We are going to be covering some estate planning topics today. So we will be covering why everyone needs an estate plan, ways to include philanthropy in your estate planning, tax efficient ways of giving, and we'll also be talking about our Macomb Solel Lakeside Legacy Giving Program. So our first speaker today is going to be our Macomb Solel Lakeside congregant, Bill Rosen. He is an estate planning lawyer, also a corporate lawyer, and he's got a solo practice locally right here in Deerfield. So he will walk us through estate planning 101, kind of some things to keep in mind as you are working on your estate plan.
This is. How about now? No? Oh, it's got modes. Oh. Real close. Oh.
And
yes.
come try to have your face right there. Look at that. And you'll be on the Zoom too. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, everybody, I'm glad to be here today. And as Wendy mentioned, I am practicing here in Deerfield after being downtown for 47 years. Anyway, it's kind of nice to not take the train anymore and, to work out of my house, and it's with Zoom and things like that. It's great. But anyway, let's get down to what I call essential considerations of estate planning. And it's really, I tried to boil this down to some really key concepts that everybody in, you may already have these in your estate plans. It may give you food for thought, whatever. But the bottom line is you need to have some kind of an estate plan in place, because if you don't, the state has the Illinois statute. By the way, I'm speaking mostly from Illinois, the Illinois standpoint. And the state of Illinois has a statute that it's called dying intestate, and they'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. And for a lot of people, that works and it's no big deal. But for other people, it is a big deal because families don't always get along, and it's based on a familial relationship, and it can be a real problem. All right, that said, the first key thing, and by the way, I've got an outline I put together, and when you guys leave today, if you want to, feel free to take one. I'm going to be speaking from the outline, but feel free to take it home. I mentioned some things in the outline that could be helpful. Anyway, the key thing that you have to consider first when you're doing your estate plan, you have to consider, whom do you want to leave your estate to? Well, it seems very obvious. Everybody thinks, well, yeah, that's easy, Bill. It's not so easy, because I've got clients, when you're going through different stages of life, or you have different situations, married, unmarried, children, no children, suddenly who you're giving your estate to doesn't become so obvious. And even if you do have children, maybe there's other situations that make it less obvious because of the nature of the children and their relationship. Anyway, so step one, you got to consider who you're leaving your estate to. Who are the main people that you want to consider, and in different stages of your life. I think of my life, when I was, turning an adult, that I could have a will. Well, gee, I'm not married, I don't have a wife. Well, maybe I leave it to my sister or my parents. Well, my parents, you don't want to go up the ladder, you want to keep it parallel or down. Well, I didn't have any children, then I got married, and then, well, maybe I leave it to my wife, who's here today, and and so, and then suddenly, well, we've got children now. So all I'm trying to point out is, think about it, because there's a lot of considerations, and you may want to consider bequests to Macomb Solel Lakeside. And it's easy to do, and you just put a provision in your will, and it's there. All right. Once you've kind of figured out who you want to leave your estate to, and this is something I can't emphasize enough, people have this perception that, oh, I'll do a will and that will cover everything. I leave my entire estate to whatever. And then you've got a retirement plan, and it's got a beneficiary designation, and it leaves it to somebody. You've got an insurance policy, it leaves it to somebody else. Oh, I forgot that years ago I put, some bank accounts in joint tenancy with my sibling. You got to sit down and write, for no other reason, write down what your assets are so you know what they are. And then, you can attach a value to it. That's helpful. But please consider whether it's going to be payable to somebody on death. And generally, most people like to avoid probate. Probate has become a dirty word. It's a lot better now than it was when I first started practicing, because it's all done independently. But the bottom line is, you want to know how these assets are going to pass. Are they held in your name alone? Are they held in joint tenancy? Are they held in real estate? Now has changed since like 1993, tenancy by the entirety. A great way to hold title to your home if you're married, because if you're married and you hold it tenancy by the entirety, you're basically judgment proof, so that you get in a car accident, you run somebody over, and you're going to have enough insurance. But if you don't, you don't have to worry about a claim and them taking your home away. But anyway, you want to be sure that your assets know what each of them is and how they're going to pass. And don't assume that your beneficiary designation that you did 20 years ago is still holding true, because life changes, things happen, and people's situation change. And you might be shocked and horrified to see who you had as a beneficiary, because it happens. Families don't always get along, and it's just the way it is. All right. The next point, do you have a will? All right, that's a basic thing, to have a will. A will, it's not a panacea for everything, but at least it's a start. As I mentioned before, if you don't have a will, the state of Illinois tells you what's going to happen to your assets, who's going to administer your estate, what's going to happen. If you have a will, suddenly you're in a situation where you are providing how your assets are going to pass. You're picking who your executor is going to be to administer your estate. And just as an aside, even if you don't have a probate estate, which a lot of people, and I'll get into that in a minute when we talk about trusts, even if you don't have a probate estate, at least you've got a document out there where you've nominated an executor. So if that executor has to take care of things, the person has some kind of standing, which is helpful. They can at least point out, well, yeah, we're not opening an estate for John Smith, but I'm nominated as the executor under John Smith's will. So at least I'll have some kind of a standing to hopefully work with the financial institution or whoever I'm working with. I did mention here, you got to understand the difference between a specific bequest and a residuary bequest. Just keep it simple. A specific bequest is where you're giving something specifically, and a lot of times it's a pecuniary specific bequest, where I'm giving $10,000 to Uncle Joe, $5,000 to my niece. That's a specific bequest. And then there has to be, and I've seen wills where they don't have a residue clause. It's something that should be so obvious, but anyway, and I'm sure those of you that do have wills, I'm sure you have a residue clause, but you got to have a residue clause, because it's going to leave all the residue of my estate not otherwise disposed of above your bequest to Macomb and so forth, All the residue of my estate I give as follows. Could be to one person, to my spouse, or in equal shares to my siblings. But you're basically giving what's called a residuary bequest. So the residue of my estate, and you can put, and I recommend putting percentage shares or fractional shares as to who's getting what. The last thing I want to mention about wills is that by having a will, and if you do have to go to probate, and hopefully you don't, but the beauty of a will, you put in a language there. I direct that my estate be administered without the necessity of a surety bond. And I've seen wills where they don't put in that simple sentence without a surety bond, and guess what? Yeah, your executor is going to be appointed, and the judge is going to say, counsel, the executor is going to have to post a bond, and every year that the estate remains open, depending on the value of the assets, it can be, a nice premium going to the surety company that's paying insurance. I don't want to dwell on that. All right, trust. All right, so this is a key concept. A trust. People hear trust and they become, oh boy, what a trust. I don't know. Just keep it very simple. A trust is simply a property interest where somebody is holding that asset for the benefit of another person. So what do you need for a trust? 4 things I could think of. You got to have a grantor, the person who creates it. So I create a trust. You got to have a trustee. That's the person or corporation that's going to be in charge of administering and managing the trust corpus. And that's the third thing. The corpus, which is the assets that you put into the trust. And then the fourth thing is who's going to be the beneficiary or beneficiaries of the trust. That's it. That's what a trust is. It's don't make it more complicated than it is. A trust is simply a person or a bank or an institution, whatever it is holding an asset for the benefit of a beneficiary. All right, so that's a trust. Trust can be created lots of different ways, lots of different trusts. Typically, a trust is a standalone document a lot of times. You've heard of people having a grantor trust or a living trust. It's a good instrument to use, and a majority of the estate plan I do, it's a good thing to have even if you don't use it. But what you're doing is you're creating a trust right now. You're naming who the grantor is, and the easiest way is to do one for yourself. I'm the grantor creating it. I'm the trustee. That's called a declaration of trust, where you are the trustee. The beneficiary of the trust is me during my lifetime. And when I die, it'll be my wife, children, whatever the case may be. So that is called a living trust. And people are always afraid of, oh boy, how do I avoid probate? Well, that's the way you do it. And you register assets so that they're in the name of the trust. And so that upon death, the trust instrument governs the disposition of the property, and you don't go through probate. Types of trusts, I mean, they can be for pet trust. I've got a lot of clients who have asked me, well, I've got a pet. Can I create a trust for them? Absolutely. And the Illinois statute provides, for the creation of a pet trust. There was a famous one, or the woman in
Helmsley, right?
Yeah, Helmsley. Thank you. The Helmsley Trust. I see. Yeah, $5 million trust for her cat or something like that. Anyway, but it's a good thing to have. All right. So the trust is basically providing for whomever you want it to provide for, and it can be pets, but primarily you're looking at yourself initially, and then it becomes kind of like a will because it will determine what happens upon your death. So the trust is going to be distributed upon your death without having to go to probate. All right, let's talk about estate taxes. This is kind of an important thing to also know. Right now, there's two where we live in Illinois. There's an Illinois estate tax and there's a federal estate tax. Under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2018, the exemption got supercharged. And right now we're at about a little over $13 million exemption federally, which is great. Goes up to almost 14 million next year. But then you're gonna start hearing about people freaking out. Oh, boy, January 1st, 2026, I understand it's all gonna change. Yeah, it goes back to the way it was in 2017. And based on inflation, it comes out to somewhere around $7 million. After the election on Tuesday, I'm a little less concerned than I was on Monday, because I think it depends on what Congress, we don't know where they're going, but they'll probably, and I'm a bad predictor, I didn't do a good job predicting the election. They're probably going to extend it, hopefully, so that we won't have to worry about federal estate taxes. Now, the state of Illinois, different story. The state of Illinois is only $4 million only. You know, for some people, it's most people, that's enough to keep you out of worrying about estate taxes, which is great. But for Illinois, it is $4 million. And if you want to look up, you know, the Illinois estate tax is going to be what's the most likely. And the consideration here is that to calculate the Illinois estate tax, you look at, they've got a calculator online, and in my outline, it's got where to go. You punch it in and say, okay, what do I got? I'll plug in the number. Oh boy, that's what I got to pay. Or, oh, good, I'm safe. Anyway, it's based on a calculator. Illinois is only one of 18 states that have a death tax. I do have clients that have got second homes in Florida or other states that don't have estate taxes. Hey, look at Wisconsin, Michigan, they don't have estate tax. So you can theoretically change your residence as an estate planning tool to eliminate estate tax, because people in those states, they're not going to worry about 13 million. That's way over, and they don't have a state estate tax, and it's a good thing. Right, and then moving right along, the marital deduction. We got about 5 minutes yet. Moving right along to the marital deduction. We talked about the exempt amount: 13 million federal, 4 million Illinois. Now, going to give you a concept of the marital deduction. You maybe know about it, maybe you don't know about it. The bottom line is a spouse can give a spouse an unlimited amount of money during lifetime, or can leave an unlimited amount of money to the spouse at death. And it doesn't matter whether in any kind of a marriage. I have gay marriages. I have clients, and it applies for them too. It's not based on sex. It's strictly based on the concept of marriage. So what you've got is this concept. You can have a will or a trust that leaves everything to the surviving spouse. You could have, let's say you got take an example, $6 million estate. I leave my entire estate to my wife. And if you've got children, we'll worry about that later. I'll leave everything to my wife. And so she inherits $6 million. Great. No estate tax, because Rosen told me that there's a marital deduction, gross estate 6 million, marital deduction 6 million, estate tax 0. Now my wife's holding $6 million. She dies. Uh-oh. She's over the $4 million exemption, and it's roughly going to be about 8 or 9%. I didn't do my job. I didn't do a good job of it. So you got to take the state tax exemption that I mentioned before. Let's take Illinois, and you want to carve out a separate trust for the benefit of my wife, for example. You're using the $4 million, and maybe everything over that I give to my wife. So at least I've used my $4 million exemption, so that when she continues to live after my death, she gets the benefit of that trust during her lifetime. And then when she dies, it passes estate tax free to my kids. And because she's basically using my $4 million exemption, we isolated it in a trust, and she has her own $4 million. So a married couple can pass $8 million if you do it the right way. All right, we're running out of time, but I just want to quickly go over. So that was combining the estate tax exemption and the marital deduction. You want to be able to utilize your exemption and then couple it with the estate tax, the marital deduction. Gifts, hopefully you all know that you can make gifts of currently $18,000 per year per donee. You can open a telephone book and pick out 150 people and give $18,000 to each one of them and not have to file a gift tax return. So that's a good thing. It goes up to $19,000 next year. We're heading toward the end of the year. Consider December 31st gift and a January 1st gift. So there's a quick way to give $36,000 to your children. So 18 for 2024 and 18 for 2025. And they have what's called gift splitting. So even if your spouse doesn't have the funds in his or her account, you can make one spouse makes the gift, the other spouse signs the tax return, and you're gifting more than just the 18,000. It's 36 because each of you have an $18,000 exemption. We get to powers of attorney. Hopefully you all have considered that. A power of attorney is a document in which you give an individual the authority to act on your behalf when you become unable to do so. The two most popular and important powers of attorney that we have in Illinois, it's in the statute. It's spelled out. The language is there. I tell my clients when I have them sign it, I did not invent this language. In fact, I don't want to change the language because when I go to some of these banks, they're hard enough to deal with when they see your power of attorney. I want to use the exact language from the statute. I've got websites here for the state of Illinois to look at the documents. You want a healthcare power of attorney so that if you become unable to manage your health affairs, and there's typically four areas: accepting or withdrawing treatment, admitting you to a hospital or assisted living, access to medical records, and then plans after death. Yeah, I've got clients that have wanted to be cremated, and the funeral director says, I got to have a power of attorney so I can see who I can count on to make that decision and know that I'm not malpracticing as a funeral director by cremating when the rest of the family says, oh, we didn't want him to be cremated. So that's the power of attorney for healthcare. That's the only one I can think of that continues on after death. The power of attorney for property is dealing with your assets. There's all kinds of categories: real estate, tax, different life insurance matters, safe deposit box. You go through and it's all listed, and you can look it up when you pull the form. But the power of attorney for property, it gives somebody the authority to make those decisions regarding your property and financial matters. And then the important thing to note on that is there are a lot of powers set forth in the power of attorney for property. One that's not mentioned is gifting. And you want to be sure and add the ability to make gifts in your power of attorney for property, so that if you're making gifts annually to your kids, you want, God forbid you have a stroke, and then you want your other spouse to be able to maybe make the gifts to the child, or whoever your agent may be. By the way, the agent is the person who you're appointing to act on your behalf. So that's it. And be sure on your way out, take my outline, at least look at it. And if nothing else, you'll be able to calculate Illinois estate tax and see the forms that I'm talking about today. There's other forms too, but the powers of attorney are the best forms. Absolutely. That's it.
Next up, we have Julianne Sclaver. Oh, we're switching. Oh, okay. Sorry, Sherry. Okay, Sherry Rikus, who is the co-founder of Rappaport Rikus Capital Management, is up next. And her firm is the firm that manages our Macomb Solel Lakeside Endowment Fund. So thank you very much for that. And her firm has graciously donated all of the lunch that we're eating today. So thank you very much for that too. And if we give me 1 second, we're going to pull up Sherry's presentation so you can see it on the screen.
Thank you, Sherry. And while she's pulling it up, thank you, Bill. That was amazing summary. I just want to add one quick thing for your grandchildren and your children over 18. Get a healthcare power. My daughter tore her ACL, went to the hospital, left. I said, what did they say? She said, I need surgery. I called. They said, we need your healthcare. So she had already left. So make sure your grandkids and your kids have it, from my experience. So
Zoom. Okay. Where is the Zoom? Zoom, okay. Share. All right, I think we're set. So Sherry, I'm gonna have you,
Blue, is it?
it's the way it came up.
Okay, you guys
Sorry.
can see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the honor of managing your foundation. We really enjoy working with you and want to thank you for that. As Bill said, the laws and tax laws may be in flux after this election, but there's still time this year to do some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today. And just my compliance says I'm not offering tax advice. I'm just giving you information. So consult your tax advisor.
I'll switch it for you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So today, it's not so recent. I've been doing this for a while, but we're going to talk a little bit about the tax laws, the Secure Act, how to maximize your tax deductions, because we all want to give, but why not give in a way that is a win-win? Donated appreciated stock we're going to talk about, and qualified charitable distributions from your IRA. So we're going to give you a lot of tools to use today so you can make those donations to MSL. So first of all, this is new to a lot of people and they're really not aware of it. It used to be 70.5 was required minimum distributions for everyone. But if you're born between 51 and 59, it's now 73. And if you're born after 60, it is now 75. So that's a little bit relief for some like the boomers or the end of the boomers. Another thing that's gone is called stretch IRAs. So it used to be when you inherited an IRA, it was based on your life expectancy. So if a parent died and a child inherited an IRA, they can stretch it for 20, 30 years. Now it's 10 years. So think about this. You have 2 children, you have a $2 million IRA. Each child gets $1 million over 10 years. That's $100,000. And we all know your children are doing very well financially. So couple that with their current income, that's a lot of money. So a very, very good strategy is to leave money from your IRA to MSL. And we're seeing a lot of people pre-funding their endowment gifts. You know, their thought is I want to give 100,000. They might even, we'll talk about in a moment, give it early. But you can also add it as a beneficiary on your IRA. Yes, sorry. Oh, you don't? Okay, I'm sorry. We call it that at our firm. So Macomb is MSL, sorry. Sorry about that. And then there's no longer age limits, so you can continue if you're working, contribute to your IRA. Okay, this was another big change. I'm sure a lot of you used to itemize because if you're a married couple, the standard deduction was 12,700. Now, if you don't have a mortgage, I'm going to show you an example, and it's very difficult to itemize, but have no fear, I have a solution for that. And we'll be able to get you to itemize if you so fit with donations. So right now, the maximum is 10,000 state and local tax. It's called the SALT, S-A-L-T. So here's an example. When you go file your tax return, you either itemize or you take the standard deduction. So with the standard deduction of 29,200, let's say, you know, your max state and property tax is maxed at 10,000, and in Highland Park, I'm sure a lot of your real estate taxes exceed that. And if you add the state, you're going to hit that 10,000. And you make 10,000 of charitable contributions a year. Well, guess what? You're not itemizing. You're going to take that 29,200 and the 10,000 of charitable contributions. You're not getting a tax benefit. Does everyone get that? Okay. So what's the solution? So another solution is I call this chunking your donations. I made that up, but you can accumulate it. So let's say you give about 10,000 a year to I'll say MSL just to make it clear, but you can prepay it. Here's 30,000 for the next 3 years. And when you take the 10,000 and the 30,000, you're at 40,000. So you are able to itemize and not get the full deduction, but at least get some deduction for this charitable contribution. Another way is, go back a moment, another way, and Julie will talk about it, is you can chunk your donor advised fund, which Julie's going to talk about that, but you can put it in another charitable vehicle. And again, Julie will talk in details about that. So if you decide you don't want to chunk your donations, there's still some other tax efficient ways of donating. The first one is giving appreciated stock. So the donor wants to donate 30,000 to MSL. I couldn't fit it all across here. And she owns 30,000 stock and it bought it for 10,000. So the donor might be so excited. Wow, I made so much money on the stock. I'm going to sell the stock and then I'm going to write a check for 30,000. Well, she's going to have to pay 20% and possibly more based on her tax rate on capital gains. That's $4,000. The other option is she can donate that appreciated stock. And I don't know if you guys seen your statements lately, but I think you all probably have appreciated stock over the last 3 years. We, as your financial advisor, we can accommodate that. There is no fee. We give you instructions. It's very easy. You give it to whoever's your financial advisor. They can send the appreciated stock over. We sell it and give you a tax letter for that. But instead, she can donate 30,000 of the Apple directly, and then there's no tax bill. And when that comes to us, we sell it right away, and then we invest it per the portfolio. But what if you really want to keep that Apple stock? Well, you can donate it, and then you can just rebuy it back, and it sets that cost basis at 30,000. So this is a really good, if you check your portfolios, a lot of you may have appreciated stock. You may have maybe you worked at a company, you've got a large amount of a particular stock. Use it for donations. You can also donate this to the donor advised fund, which we'll talk about later. So another great way is to donate directly from your IRA. So this is called a charitable contribution from your IRA. So let's say your required minimum distribution is 50,000 and you weren't itemizing on that chart. And I'm just using example 24% bracket. So option one, this donor wants to give 10,000. They take the $50,000 distribution from their IRA. I just used it to be simple, a 24% bracket. They're going to have to pay taxes of 12,000. See the tiers, the taxes. And then she writes the check for 10,000. Another way is she can distribute directly from the IRA. So she only takes a $40,000 distribution instead of the full 50. And then she does a qualified charitable distribution, a QCD, you might hear it, 10,000 directly from the IRA. So now she only had to pay taxes on the 40,000. It's a direct hit to your bottom line and saved about $2,400. And the charity also got the money. So this is pretty easy to do. I will caution towards the end of the year, it gets very busy. So if you want to do this, I'd start thinking about it now or early December, because you don't want to be delayed with these contributions. You need to be 70 and a half and over. So even if you're not required until 73, you can still do this at 70 and a half. And the limit for this year is $105,000. 105, and it has to be a 501(c)(3). And really, you shouldn't do it for your donor advised fund because you don't get the tax advantage. There's other ways you could distribute and then give it to the donor advised fund, but we think this is a better vehicle directly to a charity. So it's called a QCD, and I'll be around if anyone has questions. You can't do it. 70 and a half. So there are advantages to getting older. Yay, 70 and a half. And you get the smiley face. So as I mentioned before, chunking the donations is really a good idea. We have a lot of clients who might be retiring. This is their last year of work. They're in a very high tax bracket. They might put 100,000 into a donor advised fund, get the deduction this year and use that for the next 10 years. If you are in a profession where you have variable income, if you have a really good year, you might chunk the donations on that year. The whole thing about this is you wanna every 3 to 5 years, make a big donation and get the itemized deduction versus the standard deduction. Again, we don't know what's gonna happen in the next few years, but 26 we'll find out. So you can donate this appreciated stock instead of cash to a charity or a donor advised fund and really consider it a qualified distribution from your IRA. There's a lot of benefits. So now I'm gonna turn it over to Julie, since I've convinced you all to make a big donation to the donor advised fund. She's gonna walk you through on how that works.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, give me 1 second to get Julianne's presentation. Okay. Share.
So we're almost there, Sally. Thank you. I also wanted to thank you for having me this morning. Thank you to Wendy and Bill and Sherry and Vanessa.
There you go, Julianne.
Thank you. My name is Julianne Sclaver, and I work at the Jewish United Fund, specifically in our Center for Jewish Philanthropy. You may not be aware about the Center for Jewish Philanthropy, but it has been in existence for over 50 years now. And we've partnered through the Center for Jewish Philanthropy. It's equivalent to a Jewish community foundation. In some communities, it's a separate organization. We house it, the Center for Jewish Philanthropy, within the Jewish United Fund. For over 50 years, we've been helping thousands of donors in this community and outside of Chicago and their families with their charitable giving, both within the Jewish community and outside the Jewish community. We do this work through donor advised funds that Sherry referenced, as well as family supporting foundations. Last year in 2023, we managed $1.4 billion, that's billion with a B, in assets operated in over 1,000 donor advised funds and approximately 32 family supporting foundations. We now manage the interests of over 2,200 individuals and their families and help make grants of over $100 million to important work in communities here in Chicago, nationally, and around the world. So what is a donor advised fund? It's a charitable investment account for the sole purpose of supporting charitable organizations that you care about. It's essentially a charitable checking account. You don't get a checkbook, but that's essentially how you use it. So how does it work? It's very, very simple. The first step is to make a tax-deductible donation to the Jewish Federation for the benefit of a donor advised fund. So as Sherry was referencing, that is taking $20,000 in 2024, maybe, and making that donation to the Jewish Federation. It's a tax, the tax deduction takes place at the time you make the gift to the Jewish Federation. That's the taxable event. At the time you make the contribution to the Federation to establish your donor advised fund or to give more assets to your donor advised fund. Once you've made the donation to the Federation, whether it's securities, whether it's cash or if it's securities, the securities are sold and they're invested. And the Federation uses a number of investment vehicles. Most of them are Fidelity investment vehicles, and you can choose up to 3 vehicles for investing your funds. And then your fund's ready to go, and you can make your donations or grants to your favorite charities. So again, it's very easy to get started. It only takes $1,000 to get a donor advised fund started here at the Federation. And again, at that time, that's when you qualify for a tax deductible donation. You can choose from a number of investment options, and then you can name your fund. Many donors name the fund. My last name is Sclaver. They'll name it Sclaver Charitable Fund, Sclaver Family Philanthropic Fund, Sclaver Family Tzedakah Fund. however you want to name it. If you want to name it in memory, in honor of anybody, that those are all possibilities. Then the fund starts supporting your favorite charities. Grants can be made to any 501c3 public charity, not limited to Jewish organizations. You can do all your giving here to Jewish organizations, to secular organizations from your Jewish Federation Donor Advised Fund. The only limitation is that the organization cannot be contrary to the best interests of the Jewish people or Israel. Now that usually has not been an issue. That's becoming obviously more of an issue since October 7th. It is a service that we provide to our donors in terms of researching and doing due diligence on various organizations to make sure that they're not making statements that are contrary to the best interests of the Jewish community and Israel. The best news is that you can actually pay your synagogue dues from a donor advised fund. So we like to hear from people. We start hearing from people in June to start paying their membership dues. You can pay your any type of appeal that comes from your synagogue from your donor advised fund. So again, why a donor advised fund? And Sherry went through this. There are a lot of benefits to having a donor advised fund. As Sherry explained, the tax benefits of using a donor advised fund, and then also the variety of assets you can use to fund a donor advised fund. The Jewish Federation, unlike some of the commercial banks or financial institutions that host donor advised funds, accepts privately held stock, real estate, and mineral rights. We actually do have a number of people who've donated mineral rights to us. So we do accept a variety of assets. So if you have an asset that you're, not sure how you're going to pass it along, it might be very valuable in terms of your philanthropic giving, and you can donate it to the Federation for the benefit of your donor advised fund. Again, the assets in the fund grow tax-free because they're invested. And then it's very easy to make we call them grants, we would call a donation. You have an online portal. You can make your donations through the online portal, but also you will have a staff person like myself specifically assigned to your fund. So you'll have a direct number and a direct email to contact your staff person. You can do your giving through the staff person. I get numerous emails saying, please make the following donations, and our staff can take care of that for you if you're not comfortable using an online portal. Now, Sherry, you didn't mention this, but I know you've said this, that using a donor advised fund has saved your marriage because you do not have to collect tax receipts for every single donation you make. The taxable event happens when you fund the fund. So if you put in $20,000, that's your tax deduction, and you do not need to wait to get all the receipts for your $180 here, your $2,000 there. So people do like it because it's very organized. You can see your giving history through the portal, or the staff person can send you your giving history. What did you give last year? Did I already make my gift to the synagogue this year? All that information is available online or through your Federation staff person. And the other thing people do like is that gifts can be made anonymously if you so choose. But why would you open a donor advised fund at the Jewish Federation as opposed to Schwab or Fidelity, which also offer it? Well, we really pride ourselves in working with multiple generations, with families. We do a lot of work, and I know Sherry does this too, in talking about family values, about tzedakah, and passing on the legacy. So we really take a lot of pride in working in multiple generations, even with donor advised funds. Also, you can name a successor to your donor advised fund. You can, upon your passing, an adult child or whoever you name as your successor can take over the fund at that time to continue making grants. We help donors explore their interests in philanthropy. We do a lot of research for donors. We have donors, one common interest in the past few years has been violence, or concern has been violence in the city of Chicago. So we've done research on organizations that are addressing it. We've worked with different groups and collaborations in helping those donors support various violence intervention projects if that's what they're interested in. We've done research into Jewish environmental groups, et cetera. So whatever you have an interest in, our staff can research and pair an appropriate organization with your interests. And then finally, post October 7th, we find the Jewish community has been reevaluating their philanthropic giving and the importance of giving through a Jewish lens. So when you make a grant from your Jewish Federation donor advised fund, the check is coming from the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago. We call that giving through a Jewish lens, but we also have access, again, to various organizations. If you're interested in hunger, we can put a Jewish lens on that and connect you with a Jewish organization doing that work locally in Israel, internationally. So people are really starting to think about giving Jewishly. And we've actually had donors who had donor advised funds at the commercial banks at Fidelity and Schwab actually transfer their funds to us because they wanted to really focus on giving through a Jewish lens. I always get this question, how do you benefit? How does the Federation benefit from this? First and foremost, we benefit because we have increased donor contact with our donors who have donor advised funds. So as I said, each fund is paired with a staff person. You can communicate via email, you can call. We deal with donors all day long who are calling us, who are asking us questions, who want to make grants, and we really value that relationship. Also, donors who have donor advised funds are the first ones to respond to crises. We saw this at COVID, when quarantine started. Donors with donor advised funds called and said, what do I do? How can I help? And we were able to make recommendations to them, both to secular, for example, hunger relief organizations, and then Jewish hunger relief organizations. Then the response continued with the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, and even hurricane and disaster reliefs. Our donors are the first ones, our donors with donor advised funds are the first ones to respond because they've already set aside those charitable dollars. So again, a donor advised fund is very accessible. It's a very low barrier to establish one. You don't have to be a millionaire. All it takes is $1,000 to start a donor advised fund. And I brought information. They're in the blue folders next to Bill's outline. So please feel free to take a folder with you. It's got my card. You can call me, you can email me. I'm happy to talk to you after the presentation. And I think we're open to questions if you all three of us are open to questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're just going to take a moment to bring up our two Macomb Soil Lakeside Legacy Giving co-chairs. We have Rick Schuster here and we have Russ Erlbacher here, and they will explain a bit more about what we have going on here.
I went to a great restaurant last night and it was so loud, I lost my voice. So Ross is gonna do that.
So, first of all, thank you, Bill, thank you, Cher, thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Wendy Bloom, for really spearheading today's event. Thank you, Vanessa and Holly, the whole office staff. As always, it's been a team effort in putting an event like this one on. So I just wanted to recognize everyone who had a meaningful part in helping to put today together. So yeah, just a little bit about what our legacy giving program is. And, as we, maybe a little bit of history, we came together 5 years ago, right, as Macomb Soil Lakeside, and we had the ability to sort of do some things that maybe neither legacy congregation had done before, and start charting, our new path forward together as a unified yet new congregation. And I think I know, at least speaking for Legacy Soil side, was, we didn't sort of actively do we do a campaign, I think like every 10 years or so with a capital campaign. I know Lakeside had some very successful capital campaigns, also built wonderful additions onto the building there. But one thing I think when we got together and with David Morrison, I forgot to recognize David Morrison also. He's our Vice President of Development on the board. One thing David said was like, hey, legacy giving should be, hopefully easy to do. Now, nothing in giving is ever easy, but we weren't asking for money today, right? So we said that this sounds like a good plan. And just to give you a little bit of the history, we got some coaching, and guess where we went for the coaching? We went to the Jewish Federation of Chicago, and they hooked us up with a great coach who told us, how you get one of these programs going. And not only do they give us some active coaching, they give us some micro grants. So we get little grants, help us print material. We get little grants every time we collect a legacy gift document. For every 2, I think we get $500, Holly, is that right? So, we love it if people say I've made a gift, and we always say, if you don't mind putting it in writing, we can get, for every 2 we can get $500 from Federation. So we've got wonderful little grants from Federation to help sort of spur us on. So we've been going for, I think, just over a year now, and we started sort of small with a little bit of, let's test this out, see how it goes. And I would say, for those we've been speaking to, it's been very well received so far. And we've got a little pamphlet. I think we're holding it up over here. But again, outline some of the steps in different vehicles and some of the exact strategies you've heard about today, giving from an IRA, giving by a life insurance policy, which I don't think we really talked that much about giving from a life insurance policy today, but that's also an option through donor advised funds as well. And so we've got a pamphlet there. And if you'd like to talk more about it, Rick and I and Wendy, who's also now part of our legacy giving team, or David Morrison, we'd be happy to schedule some time with you to talk a little more about specifics. So I'm gonna hand it to you for just.
Holly's going to get some, so we'll also place those on the table. Yep.
Identifies 3 major vehicles for giving. You can make a charitable bequest. You can use a donor advised fund, or you can do the life insurance that Ross just referenced. So far, we have over 15 members who have joined our legacy giving program. A number of them are here in this room, and I can't thank them enough for stepping forward already to get our campaign launched. The Erlbacher family and the Schuster family have also participated. So if we're going to ask other people to give, it's a matter of joining us. But again, I can't thank you enough for those of you in the room who have already stepped forward.
So I think we'll pivot to Q&A, Wendy,
Yeah.
is that right?
So this brochure, we will also be adding that to the table so that when you head out, you can grab one of those too, please do. So we have a few minutes left, I think, where we can take questions. If any of our panelists, maybe all of you guys want to come back up, that'd be terrific. And Vanessa will go around.
I have a question for Julie. So I love the charitable giving funds. I do know there's a couple little restrictions. Maybe do you want to touch on gifts you can't give or things you can't do? Because there's one, maybe you want to touch on that, Julianne? You know where I'm heading with that?
Well, I think I mentioned the restriction is organizations that are contrary to the interests of Israel.
I think tables.
Oh, for sponsorship for events, is that what you're referring to? Okay. So like anything else, you cannot get a tax deduction when you buy a ticket to an event. If the event costs $100 and the ticket is $100, that's not a tax. You can't write that off. It's not tax deductible. Similarly, you cannot use a donor advised fund to buy tickets to an event or to sponsor, let's say, a table. You can't use it for the actual cost of the event, but if a sponsorship, let's say, is $10,000, you get 10 seats at the table, and each seat is $100. Then you can't use your donor advised fund to pay for the seats, but anything over the 10 seats times $100, so $1,000, you can use your donor advised fund. So that is the restriction.
Yeah, you can't get a benefit. You can't get any monetary benefit.
I'm answering the question, you just sit in front of me.
Oh,
So, for Federation, first I kind of need to know.
Julia.
Back any of the money. You know, when you open up a charitable, sort of advice fund, does the Federation keep any of that initial investment?
That's a good, yes.
Perfect. And does the Federation offer charitable gift annuities? And would that be something, it's cool because charitable gift annuities, you can get additional contribution. And then it's a lifetime, resource for donor, is you get a kickback. Every quarter or so, you get some of the percentage of the revenue from the investment. So two part.
Great. I'll answer the second one first because that's an easy answer. Yes, we do have charitable gift annuities. I have a colleague that specializes in that. So if you want more information, I'm happy to refer you to my colleague on that. The first question was respect to holding back money. We do not hold back money. We do charge fees. Our fees are 30 basis points for the donor advised fund, which is competitive with all of the commercial financial institutions. So we do charge fees on the donor advised funds. It's tiered based on the amount. So I think the breaking point is $250,000 or $2 million or $1 million. I don't remember. It's in the policies and procedures, but we do charge fees. The other way that the Federation could potentially benefit is that if you do not name a successor to the fund or you do not name beneficiaries to the fund upon your passing, the default is that the balance of the fund goes to the Jewish Federation's legacy fund. So we're not holding back money, but we do charge fees if that's what you were getting to. Yeah.
Any other questions?
can I add one thing with, oh,
Sure.
so I was actually in charge of our legacy at Beth Evan. And I was in charge of Beth Evan. It was a great program, and I used to end every talk I did is we all leave our valuables, our stocks, our jewelry, real estate to the next generation. But leaving your values is almost as important, if not more. And my kids know that I have legacy gifts for several organizations, and it shows how important the organization is. So I hope you will all consider giving a legacy gift.
Thank you very much. I think that then concludes our
And eat more.
lunch. Yeah,
There's so
I
much.
appreciate it coming so very much. Thank you.